Hey everyone, welcome to this session of DEMOFEST. This session's entitled Your Technical Sales Are the Unsung Heroes of Your Business with Freddy Mangum here. And DEMOFEST is hosted by Consensus, and we help pre-sales teams to scale with intelligent demo automation. We'll be recording this session and posting the links in about 2 weeks to our Scaling Pre-Sales and Sales Engineering LinkedIn group. So we encourage you to join the group so you can take advantage of the recordings. I'll paste the link to that LinkedIn group in the chat. Just so you can get to know your presenter a little bit, Freddy started his career over 25 years ago as a sales engineer and has since held various C-level GTM roles with high growth companies scaling revenues from 1 million to 1 billion. One of his passions is to elevate the importance of technical sales professionals on the at high-tech companies. He frequently writes about the topic, and you can read about it on his LinkedIn articles. Freddy, I'm going to pass it over to you. You can go ahead and take presenter from here. We'll have about 30 to 40 minutes to hear from you. And throughout Freddy's presentation, if you have questions, we're going to have time for that at the end. So feel free to drop those in the Q&A feature, and we'll address them there.
Great. Thank you very much, Taylor. I really appreciate it. And let me go ahead and share my screen if I may. There you go. Good morning or good afternoon, everybody, depending where you are in time zone wise. I will share my screen, and Taylor, if I could just ask you to confirm that you can see it. Is that being shared?
Yep, we have it now.
Outstanding. All right. Well, thank you so much for the opportunity to chat, and thank you for all that are attending. Today, my topic of conversation is really intended to help the technical sales professionals really elevate their influence at companies. I wrote a blog post that got a lot of warm reception from the community about how technical sales are the unsung heroes of business. And the intention of this conversation is really how can you gain influence at your company? I, for one, can talk with a lot of experience on this, but at every board meeting and executive level meetings I've been involved with, you know, there's often a lot of times discussions about how to revise go-to-market, how to make things more effective. And there just seems to be, in general, a lot of focus on sales activities, marketing activities. But one of the things that's often overlooked is the importance that technical sales can bring to the party. And I, for one, can have a very strong emotional attachment to the importance of technical sales, because when I took over a sales organization at a company, we actually personally lost a $6 million deal because of the way the evaluation process was ineffectively managed by just having some very inexperienced technical sales folks involved in that particular account. So I kind of share that story often with companies because it just highlights the point of it's really critical to pay attention to technical sales. With that said, I want to share a really what I felt to be a powerful quote from a public company CEO who does appreciate the importance of technical sales. And his statement was much to the effect that, you know, there's been plenty of sales reps that have attended President's Club and gotten some nice commission checks on the back of SEs. And luckily, this public company CEO recognizes the importance of technical sales and the role they play in his B2B company. And I thought that was just a really powerful soundbite that he shared. So for today's conversation, what I'd like to do is provide kind of a little bit of a prescriptive guide for technical sales professionals attending this particular session to help you think a little bit about how can you gain influence within your organization, how can you grab a seat at the table so you can impact your company's success. And there's 6 things I'd love to be able to kind of cover today, and I'm going to draw a very strong analogy to the game of football, which hopefully will start off sometime this year, COVID withstanding. And the 6 things I'd love to kind of have you think about is, you know, just number 1, know your position in the field. Number 2, understand the dynamics of your teammates that you're working with. Number 3, really you think of activities that you have to do. Are you playing to gain inches, or are you playing to gain yards? Number 4 is basically, you just have to perform, which we'll cover that a little bit more about what I mean by that. Number 5 is play to win, and number 6 is keep your score of your particular KPIs. So with that said, I guess the first thing that I'd love for you to think about a little bit is, what's your position, what's your field position, right? Is your company in a land scenario right now, especially during the COVID pandemic crisis that we're all experiencing, or are they more kind of in a basically a retain and expand kind of state of mind? And one of the things that I've experienced is, in talking to a lot of folks, is that in some cases pre-sales will be involved in qualification components, which makes me, I think, oftentimes wonder, why are technical sales professionals involved in qualification? They shouldn't be responsible for that. They should be consulted. The sales rep should be driving that qualification process, and that typically can be a signal of other issues afoot, either within the sales organization or particularly within that rep. So what you can see here is basically the RACI model, which being applied to different phases of sales, right? Awareness, qualification, presentation, demo, evaluation, and purchase. And when you're kind of measuring for an effective dynamic between technical sales and sales, you typically see the sales engineer or pre-sales individual really accountable for the demo and evaluation, but they should not be accountable for presentation. They should be responsible, i.e. they should share that responsibility with the sales rep, and they should be consulted with this by the sales rep, not be responsible for it or accountable for it. And in some cases, technical sales are also not aware of marketing campaigns. Technical sales should be informed of them, and if they're not, then that's an issue. I personally found that sales engineers are a wealth of information as to kind of what campaigns can be effective, can hit the mark with prospects. If marketing is saying something that completely is out of touch or out of reality with what the sales engineer is seeing in the field, then that's an issue. So this is kind of a framework to really understand kind of, if you think about what you're experiencing in your company, and how that RACI model would break down for you. It's kind of a way to just be aware of what is your current position in the field. And if you're having to be responsible or accountable for qualification, it's okay, but it's just important to understand perhaps that's not what's supposed to be happening, and there may be other things to be aware of happening within your organization. So really just think of where are you spending most of your time versus where you should be spending most of your time. The second thing is understanding your teammates is really, again, just having a lot of situational awareness of what do your teams care about. And one of the things that I'm encouraging a lot of portfolio companies for a venture firm that I'm a venture consultant at is really to make sure that technical sales has a seat at the table in those land, expand, retain conversations. And also just understanding kind of like what do these key groups really care, and how can technical sales engage with them knowing the audience. So for instance, finance, and I can tell you I've been in plenty of meetings where sales will come into an e-staff meeting and say, hey, if you want me to meet these top line objectives, I need more salespeople. And finance is saying, well, show me your productivity metrics for salespeople, just do more with less. And there seems to be this kind of contentious back and forth between finance and sales kind of going back and say, well, I can't meet those, top level growth objectives unless you give me more people. And then finance saying, well, you got to be more productive than people, show me those metrics. So understanding kind of those dynamics and how technical sales can contribute in that dialogue to be a peacemaker, if you will, I think is really important, because finance is typically trying to manage, top line and bottom line expenses and top line growth metrics, and they're trying to do it with a high level of precision and accuracy. And this becomes much more acute when you're a publicly traded company, because the street does not reward you for unpredictability. You get penalized for either overestimating or underestimating. You got to be accurate, because it gives the investors the confidence that you know how to run your business. Sales, I think we all are fairly aware of kind of the personality attributes and characteristics there. They're very, they're very driven by providing results, and they can either, their success is determined on a quarter-by-quarter basis, or sometimes even on a month-to-month basis. Customer success is there driving towards certain KPIs of retaining customers, customer satisfaction. Product marketing is basically there to really drive a message that resonates on kind of the outcomes that it enables for prospects. And product management is really trying to prioritize feature development based on jobs to get done for the personas, and really establishing product differentiation. Engineering obviously wants to be able to deliver a quality product. And demand generation is obviously has some interesting dynamics with sales. It's like that old cliche from the Glengarry Glen Ross, here are the golden leads, and sales says the leads are weak, and there's always this contentious type of relationship of the leads are never good enough for sales, but then demand generation folks are saying, well, the leads are great. And again, anything technical sales could help, those kind of constituents say, no, here are some attributes you might want to think about to really identify what would be the right characteristics for a qualified lead would be, I think, helpful. And then thought leadership is obviously just trying to get more awareness for the company and the product. And HR is always really an advocate for the company. They're there to protect the company from any downside liability, and really help all these different department heads think about kind of hiring, upgrading, training the corresponding folks within each department. So again, just as you think about your teammates and departments, it's just important to really understand kind of what drives them, what motivates them, so then you can engage with them in a way that is in the service of the things they're trying to be successful. The third thing that I would really encourage folks within the technical sales community to think about very thoroughly, especially now so more than ever, is, where do you, I think I read somewhere that, in a 50-hour work week, and actually might have been from Consensus, in a 50-hour work week, you could probably easily fill your week with 60 hours worth of work. And one of the things I've seen from highly effective sales professionals is they really kind of take a step back and go, I can work 60 hours a week, but what are the, where can I allocate my focus on the 50 hours of work that I'm going to put on my calendar that can move the business forward in yards and not inches? And one of the things that's actually coming up more and more, and I just recently had a conversation with a chief revenue officer that's re-architecting his go-to-market, and he's got a mix of hardware, a hybrid, and a SaaS product set, is that he is personally experiencing, and I'm sure this may not necessarily be a lot of news to everybody here, but he's personally experiencing that when it comes to the aspects of presentation, demo, and evaluation, most of his hardware product sets required an on-site experience, which is not on the cards anymore. And, according to him, he is not going to allow his sales teams to travel for the rest of the year. It's something he's going to revisit come 2021, but he doesn't really envision that to take place anytime soon. And whenever possible, he'll do things remote. So, but it's obviously the hardware product mix is not going, or the hardware product lines are not going to get the level of attention that they once did, which basically it's forcing him to really say, okay, what can we do with our SaaS products? What can we do to kind of really increase our efficiencies in presenting, demoing, and driving evaluations on a remote basis? Where can we automate things like presentations or demos? And how do we actually really find an opportunity from this work from home dynamic to really drive velocity and sales motion and driving products? So what I found to be pretty intriguing is that he's really kind of at this point thinking largely around how to land new products or logos with the SaaS, and perhaps with the current hardware install base, how to retain and how to potentially expand to that customer who already may have a hardware product to a hybrid or a SaaS solution. So something to think about as you explore kind of your work activities and where you could make the biggest impact. And there's actually another technical sales leader I just spoke to where his company is migrating more towards a SaaS solution. And really, it's kind of changing how, it's changing the workflow, if you will, of the presentation, demo, and evaluation tasks that a technical sales leader does or technical sales professional does. and really kind of forcing the conversations of where can we automate and gain efficiencies, either with internal processes that they built in-house or commercial tools that they can get from the market. On the fourth component around performance, decades ago, literally, when I played football, I used to have all football coaches would say, I want to be lucky, but luck is a function of preparation meeting opportunity. And I think oftentimes as technical sales professionals, we're very often caught up in that reactive mode, responding to sales inquiries, or being just putting out fires. But I think it's really important and I hear this a lot from managers, that they're looking at the technical sales crew on kind of the technical sales capabilities that they currently have. Do they know the right level of acronyms? Do they have the right level of technical proficiency to basically gain that technical advisor status or stature with a prospect? I think, as everybody knows here, the technical sales professional is someone that's seen as a technical advisor, as a trusted advisor by prospect. They're not necessarily seen as someone that's looking to retire quota. And I think it's really important to have the depth of that technical expertise and continue to refine it, especially as technology evolves so quickly, as we all know. The other component, though, that is equally important is really fine-tuning those sales capabilities. And I, for one, when I was in my early 20s, I would just get focused on technology. I didn't really have the self-awareness in my early 20s to really be mindful of kind of those sales acumen skill sets, those asking the question behind the question, the MEDIC framework. And I think that's where there's plenty of really good professionals that can help with here's how you begin with the end in mind, or here's how you demo, here's how you present. And I think it's really important to take full advantage of those types of thought leaders, buy those books, listen to those webinars, encourage your company to retain those services where someone can come on site, or rather I should say nowadays that someone can do virtual training on kind of how to refine those sales capabilities, because combining both the technical skill sets and sales capabilities will ultimately improve your performance. So something to be mindful of, and many other folks I think that have been in the consensus have that thought leadership and expertise to really help the technical sales professionals fine-tune those sales capabilities. Okay. The next one is really about how do you play to win, and what does that mean? And this is actually a really I'll ask everyone to forgive me here because I start geeking out when it comes to metrics and numbers, but this is actually a really fascinating concept. And when you play to win, the thing that investors look for, and some are much more acute at this than others, is they're looking for that sales efficiency. And technical sales tends to fall under the sales efficiency metric. And this is actually Tomas from Redpoint Ventures actually has written about this, about defining sales efficiency. And it's something that a lot of investors, both private investors and public investors, kind of understand inherently. And it's something that your executive team, and some executive teams more than others, really track. And let me kind of define a little bit what I mean by sales efficiency. So one way to think about a sales efficiency essentially is that it's the incremental revenue that's returned net to cost of providing that product or service by the additive sales and marketing expenses. And technical sales typically falls under that S&M, under that sales and marketing expense. So if you look at a financial statement, there's a line item that's just sales and marketing. There isn't a separate line item for sales, or a separate line for marketing, or a separate line for technical sales. It's all inclusive in that S&M expense that then is used to calculate gross margin, net contribution margin, and so forth. So one way of kind of codifying this would be basically, if a startup invests about $500K in marketing and sales in a given quarter and generates $1 million of incremental revenue, net of the cost of providing that service. For the next 12 months, the sales efficiency would be considered a 2. So simple way of thinking about it is 500K generates $1 million is a sales efficiency number of 2. What's fascinating is that, again, crediting Tomas from Redpoint on this, when he did a lot of analysis on kind of a lot of the sales efficiency metrics for SaaS companies, the medium number really equates to 0.8, which means that, you know, if a company spends about 500K in sales and marketing expense, you're looking at 400K incremental revenue for the next 12 months. And the logic behind that is basically that, you know, you land that customer, and now in the next 12 months that follow thereafter, there is no additional expense to land that customer. That's why retain metrics are so important, and that's why there's such a big emphasis on customer success, or to minimize churn, to minimize customers leaving. And there's actually some fascinating companies, like I think LinkedIn is like in the 10 or 20 range, that has some inherent viral qualities. And there's products that are kind of, you know, 0 or below 0, which is really bad. And that's where the company's enterprise value gets severely impacted, because, you know, it's extremely costly to retain those new customers. And I'll kind of, I think this is important to understand for technical sales professionals, because, you know, your actions play a role in that sales efficiency metric. And as I mentioned earlier, when in a lot of C-level conversations, when there's a discussion about how to make things more efficient, how to move top line, especially now, I mean, every company that I'm aware of, both public and private, have been going through a triage exercise. They've been determining, okay, with COVID, how do you really, you know, how do you really sharpen the saw? How do you survive? All right, it's anyone's guess as to when things are going to recover. In some industries, they may not recover. So sales efficiency gets a particular level of attention, but, you know, the conversation takes to be quickly on, what does sales need to do? How do we make sales more effective? Do we hire more salespeople? What does marketing need to do? And I would propose that, you know, let's kind of walk through a couple of scenarios where I think technical sales can make a significant impact in sales efficiency. And I've written about this just to kind of really more be provocative and provide an example. But if we take a look at just a generic funnel here, and for these purposes, I kind of, you know, categorize the funnels of the sales funnels of pre-sales, which is, you know, awareness, qualify, present, demo, evaluate, and purchase. And again, this is a very generic funnel. I'm sure every company has their own variant of this. And then from a post-sales, you know, how do you implement an upsell? And if we just, for the purpose of illustration, if you take a baseline of 0.8, which is the median as most SaaS companies, and just break that down to each step, the thing that I've been really challenging portfolio companies and that I advise is, you know, what happens if you try to say, okay, how do we increase SDR, let's say, efficiency, and try to increase this from a 1 to a 3, basically a net 0.2 increase, right? That gets you to, let's say, an efficiency of 1, which means for every 500K over 12 months, you generate an incremental revenue of 500K, roughly. Now, what happens if you, you know, again, try to increase your sales efficiency for your sales reps in qualification, presentation, and the purchase? You know, maybe that gets you to an additive 0.4 efficiency, which, you know, now gets you from an 8 to a 1.2, which means that, you know, now for 500K, you're able to, you know, to increase your efficiency to basically, what do we have here? You know, 600K over 12 months. And then again, you can see kind of a similar increase efficiency from a 0.8 to a 1.5 if you now focus on optimizing your post-sales efforts around implementation and upselling from a 0.8 to a 1.5, which gets you a 0.7 increase. But the thing that I really would challenge organizations to think about is, what if you make technical sales more efficient? What happens if you make the technical sales professional more efficient in providing both tooling, training to do a better job in presenting, to automate demos, to improve the evaluation process? What if you could gain a 0.8 efficiency in your sales efficiency metrics and go from a 0.8 to a 1.6, basically double that? That basically means that for 500K over 12 months, the company could generate an incremental revenue of 800K, which is which is quite substantial if you think about it. And again, I'm just posing that question because oftentimes, as I mentioned earlier, there's a lot of discussions around how do you make your marketing more efficient, how do you make your sales more efficient, how do we retain more customers. But I've experienced that technical sales discussions get overlooked, and I think it's important to kind of just for those that are on this particular session, it's just to think about how can you implore or suggest to your peers that, hey, if we make technical sales efficiency, how will that be helpful for the business? And I would and I'm challenging many of the companies, like I said, that I advise and work with, to really think about that closely, especially nowadays, especially as SaaS products become more pervasive, to really kind of explore what they could do there, because in some cases the company may be able to move the needle much more so by optimizing technical sales than other aspects and other departments. So and again, I think this just highlights to me and quantifies the importance that technical sales can have in an organization. The other piece, the sixth item that I would really implore folks on this Zoom meeting to think about is basically keep score. It wasn't too long ago that I was talking to an old colleague of mine. We both started as sales engineers about 25 years ago, and he's still a sales engineer at having a very successful career. And I asked him, I said, how do you track the performance of what you do? How do you track your conversion rates from eval to close one, from demos to close one? And he said, he's like, I have it partially in my head and partially on my laptop. And I asked, well, I said, but who else knows your kind of track record? Like, and he just he's like, I don't know if everybody does. And I would kind of encourage everyone to think of, like, if you don't track your own performance, who will? Right? It's almost like, how do you go about creating your own baseball card? So you just for your own element of self-awareness, and also as your career progresses, how do you share those metrics internally, and maybe even with externally when you're looking for your next job, because it's having those metrics in mind can be very beneficial, not only to you but to those around you that are trying to assess your contribution, the contribution you can bring to the company. And it's not, and I'm not encouraging necessarily to do it for vanity purposes, but just more to understand kind of how you add value and where you can add value and where you may need to improve. And that it could include things of your contribution to exceeding quota. How many sales reps have you supported? Has it been, were you an organization where there's like a 1-to-1 ratio or a 1-to-10 ratio? What were your conversion rates on converting eval to close one, demo to close one, to close loss? What kind of deal sizes did you support, and the volume of that? And and of course, any awards and recognitions that the companies have granted you, I would keep track of that. And I would keep track of that I would really encourage everyone to keep track of that throughout your career, because it also gives you stories that you can kind of showcase and share as to how you've been able to be a team player and contribute to a winning organization. In summary, if you want to gain influence in an organization, know the game. And I would think, and I would really encourage everyone to think about, know the game in the current environment you're in, and really know your company's field position. Really empathize with your teammates. Always ask yourself, are you doing things to move yards or inches? Do you have everything in place that you need to perform? Are you playing to win? Are you playing to drive that sales efficiency? And are you keeping score? And my counsel to all those attending here would be to really think highly of kind of these 6 prescriptive areas, which I tend to think more of a framework to really kind of help you, to guide you of how you can gain influence in an organization and really and really help the company win. So with that said, I think it might be a good time to open it up to questions. And Taylor, do you want me to stop sharing the slide and move to Q&A?
Yeah, you can stop sharing if you want. You don't have to. You can stop sharing. I've got a few questions that we have so far. We can jump into.
Sure.
So the first one submitted is kind of a two-part question, but the first part, David asks, how do you address situations where the sales team is accountable for discovery, but they fail to gather the information required for technical demos because they focus more on things like BANT?
Yeah. Repeat that question for me one more time, because that's a quite a loaded one for me.
Yeah. No, he says, how do you address situations where the sales team is accountable for discovery, but they fail to gather information that's required for technical demos because they're focusing more on things like BANT?
Yeah, this is this is a very loaded one. I'm trying to think of examples where I've seen that done effectively and where I haven't done it or it hasn't been done effectively. I guess there's two scenarios that I'll share with you. Is one, at a sales engineer to account rep, level, what I've seen to be fairly effective is to just really sit down and spend some time with the sales rep to say, okay, again, have empathy for the sales rep, because depending on the maturity, the experience and the maturity of that sales rep, it's not uncommon for certain sales reps to get panicky, to get freaked out, and sometimes they'll just try to push everything to a demo. Heck, I've even seen them try to push everything to an evaluation just to show the sales management activity. And the sales engineer knows very well that that activity should not be taking place. But again, a sales rep that's panicking is not thinking of how do I maximize time of my sales engineer. They're thinking of, I need to show activity, otherwise I'm going to get fired. So I think at a SE to sales rep level, I think what I've seen be effective is basically sit down and go, okay, how do we drive the right activity? Again, using that analogy of inches and yards, we can create activity, and I'm happy to support you in creating this activity. But is that the right activity that's going to help you retire your quota? Is there a framework we can come up with that will help, qualify things that we do more effectively? So as an example, if we have a product, an agent that can provide some kind of capability, some value add, and we have an agent that's only available on Windows machines, but we don't have it on Mac, and then in the qualification process, we see that this prospect doesn't have the right environment to support an agent, why are we even doing a demo? Right? So I think part of it is perhaps providing like a little bit of a checklist to the sales rep and saying, qualification should extend to these other environmental components that, can really are a leading indicator whether our product can fit that environment. And I've seen that to be fairly effective when it's just a matter of kind of first, empathizing with the sales rep of why they may be doing what they're doing. Like really put yourself in their shoes and go, why are you just driving towards activity? The other avenue that I've seen to be fairly effective is that, if that doesn't work, then it's a matter of kind of escalating that to your technical sales director or VP and really kind of saying, how do we institute a process or a framework where that can be kind of, encouraged from top down, from the powers that be, both from the technical sales leader and the VP of sales, because both of them, when they look at their KPIs and metrics, they don't want, they're looking typically at not only at close won, but close lost activities. So if they can gain greater efficiencies by not spending time on things that will more than likely eventually lead to lost deals, because there's plenty of leading indicator metrics you can look at for that, they would want to be able to encourage folks to do that. So that, to answer that question, is that there's two ways of doing it. One, what I would think of it, bottoms up from technical sales to sales rep, and then one top down from the leadership, kind of encouraging folks to follow a certain process.
Yeah, I think you answered the second part of that, which was, is having a well-defined discovery checklist the best way to start? I heard you mention that as an option, or recommending some other way of engaging them in the discovery process. Would you recommend engaging technical SEs during the sales process or the discovery process, I should have said?
Yeah, and that goes back to kind of the again, think of the RACI framework, right? The responsible, accountable, consulted, and inform. Responsible is shared, right? Accountable is the buck stops with that individual. Consulted and inform, and I think you're consulted of what is your opinion, and inform you're just being told what's there. And I think to not be dictatorial, I would encourage folks to say like, look, here's a proposal for a discovery framework, but as a technical salesperson, I'm not accountable for that. I may not even be responsible. Don't know, but I'm putting a proposal here, and let whoever is ultimately responsible or accountable, let them then build on that.
Mm.
And I think that's a kind of and I think that's what I've seen, that is when you take that approach, it becomes less confrontational and more collaborative.
Yeah. One of the suggestions in the comments from Peter on that note was using the best sales folks, the ones who make their number and consistently do a great job with discovery as examples. For the less experienced, does that seem in line with the comment you just made on finding examples that way?
That's a good point. I mean, what I've experienced, and there's some is not all sales reps are equal, right? And whether it's experience or skills or just fit in that environment, some sales reps are really good at kind of companies that are already in that 100 to a billion in revenue. Others are good at that 1 to 50 million in revenue. But not all sales reps are equal, right? So typically you'll have 20% that are kind of the right fit for that environment and perform. You have 20% that are not the right fit, and maybe the rest that fall somewhere in the middle. And I think to kind of institute frameworks or recommend frameworks, to focus on the ones that are having some element of success, because oftentimes I think everybody falls victim to this. It's easy to become the subconscious expert, where some things just kind of get directly into muscle memory. And if you can kind of get things, if you can make the subconscious a conscious expert and extract what are they doing inherently to kind of to qualify, to put the to
Yeah.
apply the activity on the right things, it can help others kind of elevate their game.
Yeah, I think this question is somewhat related to what you just mentioned. Mark is asking, how can SEs track their success at companies that don't track stats correctly, or who are still too young to track their stats in their journey? It maybe goes back to that story you mentioned where you asked your friend this question.
Yeah. Again, I think it's a matter of you tracking it yourself. And I actually wrote an article about this on my LinkedIn profile, of some of the things that again, put yourself in the mind of someone trying to assess the performance of a technical sales person, right? So what are they going to look for? They're going to look for context, and they're going to look for certain performance metrics, right? Sometimes it may not, especially for SEs that are at early stage companies, the metric of just exceeding quota may not be the only one that you need to highlight, because oftentimes early stage companies are looking for that product market fit. There may be a lot of other nuances, right? So I think it's important to kind of have the metrics of like, because with sales, it's very easy, right? You can start looking at things of, did you meet quota or not meet quota? That's the first question that you ask, right? And you want to typically hire folks that can exceed quota, because it's probably one of the strongest leading indicators that they can perform. Obviously, it's not the only one, but it's, and I think with technical sales, what is that leading indicator? And it may not necessarily be retiring quota. It's certainly a factor, but there's a lot more to it, right?
Yeah.
It would be challenging to get an SE that does, high volume, low ASPs to support, a 7-8 figure opportunity that's more in elephant hunting. So I think you just want to be able to have the metrics to contextualize kind of your performance. And I would just encourage folks to put it on a Google Doc or Excel spreadsheet on your laptop for now, if that's what it takes.
Yeah, in follow up to that, Peter mentioned it's never too early to start tracking, and I don't know, would you agree or disagree with that comment, just out of curiosity?
I absolutely agree with Peter. Again, if you don't track your performance, who's going to?
Right. All right, well, here's one other question. This might be deviating a little bit, but an anonymous question mentioned, our sales VPs want our SEs to join qualification and discovery calls and combine those two calls into one to try and shorten the sales cycle. Ultimately, just to forego our functional discovery call and just combine SEs and sales at once. What are your thoughts on that type of an approach?
I've seen it happen in certain organizations, perhaps earlier stage when you're still trying to flush out your qualification, disqualification criteria. It's not 100% unusual, but as the company scales in revenue and you're now able to start kind of mapping out an element of repeatability, you want to be able to apply your technical sales resources effectively, and doing it for qualification may not be the right way of leveraging that talent pool. I'm just thinking about my conversation with VPs and sales. The question is, it depends, but there comes a point to where you want, your high impact players in technical sales working on high impact functions, right? And if it's really about, and every business has slight nuances. Some may require the technical sales to be more heavily involved in evaluations, and aspects of demos, but wherever there's opportunities to automate the demo workflow, wherever there's opportunity to kind of scale the qualification, I've seen folks responsible for revenue to really think about when to do that. But it's not uncommon to see it in early stage companies to, let's say in that kind of 1 to 7 million ARR to have sales engineers involved in that qualification process. But they kind of start ratcheting it down once there's repeatability there.
Yeah, that makes sense. One other question also from David. I don't know if this is along those lines or not, but he mentions for measuring sales efficiency of technical sales function, what CRM fields or tools do you use to report on those kinds of things?
What CRM tools? Oh my gosh, that is a loaded question.
You mentioned, or just fields, basically asking how do you track, or what metrics are you tracking in that case?
Yeah, I mean, the metrics that I've seen tracked are basically things of, hours, kind of top line growth on an hourly basis would be a simple way of tracking that. Not all companies do it. Not all companies can do it. If you're early and you're focusing on product market fit or just repeatability in your sales motion, you're not going to look to track metrics per se, because you're just still trying to determine repeatability. I've seen companies track metrics and things like Salesforce, and then you run into the situations of, is that the right data, and then data, data hygiene and all that fun stuff. What I would encourage folks in this call to think about is just inherently think of your, if you track your performance, and perhaps other companies are not doing it. Let me back up a little bit. I would almost kind of decouple this CRM piece to it, because that's just a tool. What I would really encourage folks here to think about is, how do you just, again, back to a comment that Peter made, if you track your performance and you're at least mindful of your activities and how you're contributing to top line growth, how you're able to gain efficiencies on that front, you can then begin to plant the seeds for the rest of the organization to start thinking about, these group of professionals seem to have a good handle of how they're tracking their efficiency. Maybe, how do we incorporate those KPIs to however our company happens to track their performance metrics at that point, using CRM solutions or not? That's what that would be my comment on that question.
Awesome. There was sort of a second part to that. I'm just trying to think of how to phrase it. He mentions trying to get how you would attribute the increase in revenue to those specific stages. And I think it goes back to your play to win comment with another question that came up of where you're saying if you had a 0.8 increase going from 500K to get 400K ACV. So I don't know if there's something you could speak to in terms of how you would take those metrics that you're gathering and draw those back to sales stages and closing and that kind of thing. Does that question make sense?
Sort of. I mean, the thing about the sales efficiency component is that not all companies follow that framework to the letter. And again, it's a reflection more of kind of the thought process or the maturation of that executive team. But investors are looking for that, right? So I think if you just what I would be encourage folks to think about is, and here's my real intent of showing that in this particular forum was that just to help to help the folks here on the Zoom meeting to understand kind of like, hey, at the end of the day, my actions are contributing to a sales efficiency metric because you know the salaries that everyone uh, the salaries associated with everyone's work here is basically accounted for under the sales and marketing expense line item. And just to be able to kind of understand that, and when you talk to other folks, to your other teammates, and saying, hey, look, I know that I'm ultimately a contributor to sales efficiency, I would be curious to see how other folks respond to when you say, well, what is sales efficiency? If you get that response, then that in itself is a leading indicator and maybe an opportunity to say, hey, look, here's what sales efficiency means. And are we tracking our sales efficiency metrics? Are we, you know, and if so, how are we tracking it? And if not, should we be tracking it? But just to be able to kind of show that that's the context that you know, a sales engineer would bring to the table, I think will my intent there would be it would help to kind of elevate the influence that someone would have in an organization and get a seat at the table.
Cool. Well, we've got just a couple more minutes here before we'll wrap up and send people to the next session if they'd like to jump on that. Is there anything that you had as kind of closing comments or anything else you'd like to say before we start to wrap things up?
Yeah, I mean the closing comments are for me are that again, back to the kind of back to where we started with this is that you know technical sales are the unsung heroes of business. I really firmly believe that, and I think it's up to folks. You know, the only way that we change that is by knowing the game and by being able to perhaps follow you know aspects of these 6 suggestions here, which is that to get a seat at the table, to get that recognition, to get those additive investments in training and tooling, it's important to just be able to think think a little more holistically of the role that technical sales plays in go to market and how critical it is. Because in my experiences is for me, and I don't think I'm alone on this, but the general consensus is that this profession has been somewhat overlooked. And when you start raising some of these questions, when you start bringing up some of these points, everyone goes, oh yeah, oh yeah. So I don't think it's going to take too much for people to recognize the level of technical sales. And I guess my parting thought is that technical salespeople don't have to be the unsung heroes. And I think there's a great opportunity in the next in the years to come to change that and get a seat at the table.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much. I learned a lot from your session. I hope everyone else did as well. Our next session, if anyone would like to join that, we have 2 tracks with Rob Falcone and Brian Oleg here. These are the sessions. You should have links to these in your calendar invite. I'm sorry, in your email where you can even click to join those. That said, if you can't find it for whatever reason, if you go to demofest2020.com, there's a link under each speaker to where you can join those. You'd have your team join those even without registering to just be able to make sure everyone has a chance to view them. But thanks so much, and we'll see you at other sessions.
Thank you, everybody. Have a great day.